We're live. There's a little red symbol on the top that says live. We must be live. What am I now? Episode 6 of CoVideos for Vala Health. I'm really excited, as I have been for the last couple of weeks, or every week, because I'm joined by the most remarkable man, a friend of mine for the last couple of years. I've got the official party line. I'll read it, and then I'll say how I know Ro. And I'll let Rohan tell you a little bit about his story as well, because it's quite brilliant. So Rohan Kallicharan, he's lived with mental health for many years, struggled as a manic depressive and with manic depressive episodes, tried to take his life on a number of occasions. It's not the best intro, is it, Rohan? Thankfully, one day, though, he decided to make a massive positive change, and in desperation to change his spiraling decline in his personal life, he decided it was time to become healthier. He tells the story way better than I am right now. He's going to do that. He lost over 7 stone after he discovered a passion for running.
Yeah, that was really careless of me.
What's that? Really
careless of me to lose them.
Well, wait for it. I'm doing the before and after photo in a minute. He ran his first marathon. What year did you do that? That was
2014.
He says he's never looked back, and he's just found his kind of new fond love of fitness. It's helped him live drug-free since. As of last year, I have it written down here, you've completed 34 marathons. Is that right?
Yeah, up to 36 now, and all paused through our current situation.
Well, he's an ambassador for Mind, the mental health charity. That's the official line. I met Rohan. I met Ro a couple of years ago now, like 2016, I think, in Birmingham with Terry and Johnny, who were on last week at a conference called Man-Made. It was to do with this discussion around kind of reducing the rate of male suicide in the country and men's mental health complications. But it was more than that. It was a group of people that came together to really try to discuss, I think, in a very open forum way, what's going on, and hear kind of lived experience stories. And it was just a brilliant, very humbling couple of days. I was there looking at it from the tech angle, and I met just the most amazing people. And this young man that's on the other side of the screen to me was one of those people. And I've really enjoyed getting to know him both on a professional and a personal level over the last couple of years. So Rohan, and before, one bit of admin before I kick in and ask you how you're doing. In this episode, we are going to be touching on stories that involve around suicide. I do need to just talk about that and suicide attempts. If you are affected by any of the topics discussed in this episode, or in fact, any of the topics that we've discussed in previous episodes of CoVideos, please email info@valahealth.com, and we will signpost you to effective help and support. And I mean that as well. So it's really important that people listening aren't triggered and affected by some of the conversations we're going to have. Which leads me very nicely into my first question from my friend Ro. How have you been, pal? What have you been doing?
I must admit, I'm doing really well, thanks, Pete. Lockdown, obviously, it's impacting everyone's lives and what we're going through. But for me, I've been able to find a routine. I work within the tech space. So, I've been as busy as ever working from home. I'm an HR director for a company called Benevolent AI. So that's
a new job as well, isn't it?
Pardon?
It's a new job as well.
Absolutely. I actually started in lockdown, so finding the new normal has been a lot of fun, but really, really enjoying that. So work's been keeping me busy. As you know, I'm a year and a half into marriage, so it's been a really good time for my wife and I to get to spend time together that we probably wouldn't do. Just saving those couple of hours of commuting every day, being able to go for a walk at lunchtime, share lunch, just those differences. And of course, we've been allowed to exercise, so I've been out regularly running. I did a challenge last week as part of my fundraising to run 100 miles in a week. So that kept me out of Claire's hair for a good few hours. So no, I'm always conscious about saying that I'm thriving through this. We're all challenged. and it's, you know, it's difficult for all of us. We miss our families. Even me as an introvert, I miss social interaction, but I'm probably finding it a lot easier to grow through this than some of my friends are, for sure.
That's great. I mean, it is. I've been doing this for like 8 weeks or whatever it is, and quite a lot of the topics, and we'll discuss them tonight as well, are quite sort of dark and about the sort of slightly more complicated aspects of lockdown and COVID. But actually, there's a lot of very positive stories that have been emerging as well. You know, lots of really lovely examples of people kind of rediscovering nature and hobbies and families and learning about their kids' education, things like that. So I do think there are a lot of positives that are going to come out the last 10 weeks.
Absolutely. And we wouldn't have wanted it to come out in the way that we've been forced for it to happen. But I think we're all, you know, hopefully we'll all look back on this period and there will be things that we take from it that we've been able to take into our life beyond this. Certainly I know I will.
Good man. Well, you know, that's a very positive note to start on. Listen, before I go into questions about kind of sort of lockdown, what's been going on and things like that, I think it is important just to touch on your backstory because it is remarkable. And every time I've heard it, and especially the first time I heard it, you know, it floors you really. And I think the reason I was really keen to have this conversation with you tonight is because we've heard a lot of different angles on managing mental health and complications and difficult life situations that throw up. You know, Heather a couple of weeks ago, you know, has turned to food and diet and veganism to really kind of manage her life and her situation. We had Johnny last week who's kind of really turned to sort of education and activism and going into schools and things like that. What strikes me is that I'll get you to tell the story, like kind of fitness and exercise have really saved you from where is it, like this guy here. Hey! You were one of the Olympic playmakers, weren't you? So that was 2000s. There we go. Look at this guy. And it's like I'm not
on one seat virtually. If you were sat next to me in the stadium, that was a really unfortunate experience.
And I have to just say for the record, for anyone that's watching, like I'm not fat shaming. Like I'm not sitting here fat shaming anybody and going like remarkable, but it is the most remarkable journey from where you were to where you are. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your kind of background, where you grew up, who you are, how you got to where we're having this conversation right now? Because it is brilliant. So,
in other words, give the hour-long presentation in about 2 minutes.
You can have as long as you want. I'll interrupt. But give us the.
I grew up in Birmingham. Hopefully, not hopefully, because that would be Brummie shaming, and I'm very proud of my Brummie roots. But I'm told that you can't hear too many of them these days. And look, I had a pretty happy childhood, and there was no real sign of what was ahead. My dad was an international sportsman, actually, and he was often away for long periods. But I had a really good education, great friends around me, really good relationship with my mum. So, there was no sign of what lay ahead. I got to the age of around 16, 17 when I first started what would latterly become seen as symptoms of mental illness. I remember there was one night where literally I was at home. I was home on my own. I was old enough to be by that point. And at that point, my parents' marriage was in a very difficult state. And I think they were trying to work that out. They'd gone out. I suddenly came around from this episode of just rage where I'd literally destroyed 3 remote controls. Now that may sound flippant, but back in those days, remote controls like phones, they were like these big bricks. And I absolutely destroyed them. And I remember my mum getting home and looking at me, looking at the carnage. It's kind of like, what have you done? And I'm kind of like, I really have no idea. But the problem was, and we've spoken many times, Pete, around men's well-being. Yeah. And certainly, we're talking about 1990 to 1992 here. And I did ask for help initially. I asked for help at school. And I'm so proud now that my school have my alma mater. They have a magnificent wellbeing program. I'm so proud of them, Solihull School. But back at the time, I asked for help, and it was kind of like, look, you know, they were kind of like, there's nothing wrong with you. Dare I say that phrase? Man up. You'll be fine. You've got a great education. You've got your exams to focus on. Just do that. Don't worry. I was kind of like, oh, okay. If you tell me nothing's wrong with me, I believe you. I went to my GP, and he's kind of like, look, you know, you're a teenager. You'll go through this. Just focus on your mum and dad. Focus on your sport, your school, and you know, there's nothing really wrong with you. You'll be fine. So I basically, at the age of 17, 18, very much was told there is nothing wrong with you. Man up. So I did. But by 92, my parents had divorced. I went off to uni. I did the monumental feat of failing university, failing first year 3 times, actually. And
three times?
Yeah, absolutely. I went through 3 student grants. But actually, I mean, the backstory in terms of how mental illness was impacting me, we didn't have the symptoms of bipolar disorder back then, manic depression. But I remember there's little anecdotes. I mean, I was never one who'd kind of like wake up in the morning and need a drink. But you know, alcohol was my nemesis because it allowed me just to numb the chaos of what was going on in my mind. And of course, that just took you into a more manic state. Of course, financial recklessness is very much part of the manic state. I remember, and this was back in the day, mate, when money went a little bit further than it does now. I spent a student loan of 1,100 quid in HMV and Foster's menswear. Don't judge me on the latter, by the way. And I literally spent it in the sake of about 3-4 hours. And I mean, it sounds, again, flippant, but actually, if anyone had looked at that, they would have said, this isn't right. Something's really wrong. And then I went to the GP at university, and again, I was told, there's nothing wrong, man up, you've got a good family, you've got a good education, just focus on what's ahead of you. What they couldn't figure out was, actually, I couldn't see ahead of me because what was happening inside me was totally destructive. So I turned to self-harm. Now, self-harm, I'm not going to talk triggeringly in terms of what we have an image in our minds of what self-harm looks like, and it was never there. But I actually used to beat myself black and blue. I broke my own ribs and actually broke my own jaw at one point by beating myself up. It wasn't even a cry for help. I despised myself. And we went through that recurringly, basically for 13 years, Pete. I did come out of uni. I moved back home, and the manic episodes were normally typified by rage, and I constantly was just flying off the handle in a really bad way at the people who cared for me. And eventually, people would let me go, because I think if you look at it, all of the symptoms of bipolar look like pure, utter, irresponsible, reckless behavior. Certainly what we know now about mental illness, we didn't know then. So what were my symptoms if we really look at it? I would go into manic episodes where I'd just be the life and soul of the party, spend money that I didn't have. I ended up in huge debt that I've still really only finished paying off in the last couple of years. So I'd party hard, I'd spend stupidly. Everyone was my friend, because essentially the sensible ones would leave me, and I'd go into rent-a-crowd mode. And then I'd wake up the next morning, regret it, and I'd go into a depressive state where I couldn't leave my room for 2-3 days. So essentially what we had was, I couldn't hold down work. I tried, but essentially I was either up there, incapable of going to work, or down there, incapable of going to work. So I'm spending recklessly, I'm losing friends, I'm upsetting people. That the evil of comparison, I'm seeing that my peers are really achieving great things in their lives, and I'm looking in the mirror and thinking, well, who are you? Because no one will tell me who I am. everyone's telling me that I'm fine to man up, and actually what I'm seeing is this person that I absolutely despise. And look, the first 2 suicide attempts were cries for help, but that help never came. And again, guys, I never want you to think that I take it flippantly. It's my style of communication, and sometimes you have to smile when you're dealing with really dark events. And I'm not ashamed of anything that happened to me. I'm actually very blessed that I can tell the story, and very humbled that I have the opportunity to impact on shaping the future as an ambassador and campaigner now. But I remember after that first suicide attempt, I had to wait 2-3 days to see the crisis unit. They wouldn't let me out of hospital, but the crisis unit was so overwhelmed with cases, I had to wait for 3 days. And literally the conversation was, "Oh, what happened?" I'm kind of like, "Well, I took an overdose." They said, "Well, you're not going to do it again, are you?" I said, "Nope." Said, "Great, off you go." Literally, that was a conversation. They didn't realize that I had nowhere to go to. And I was homeless on more than one occasion during this period, although on that occasion, someone took me in, and I was very grateful for it. But we got to that stage where, you know what, living with that kind of illness is exhausting.
Yeah.
You have to work so hard to get through every single day, and people don't see it because they can't see what's wrong with you. So I was exhausted. I was blown away. I couldn't for a minute see a way out, and I couldn't bear the pain that I was putting the friends and family that remained. I couldn't bear to put them through anymore.
Yeah.
And that was it. I'd gone from age 16 and breaking remote controls through 3 failed first years at uni, through failing to being able to hold down a job, to build any kind of a life, to not unsuccessful suicide attempts, because actually I never meant to end my life with those first 2, but the help never came. And the third one I didn't want I didn't want to wake up. And I'll never understand, and Pete, you know that I have a deep degree of faith, which is a big part of my life.
I was going to ask you about that in a minute.
Yeah, I'll happily speak about it later. Somehow I woke up that next morning and I wanted to live. And I said the most important words in my life. And for anyone living with mental illness, they are the most important words you will ever say. I picked up the phone to my mum, who I believe was at the till at Marks and Spencer's, from what I hear, but although that could just be an embellishment of the story. She could have been on the escalator, or she could have been packing her bags or something. But I kind of said the words, "Right, I need you to be calm. I'm at the hospital, and I need help." And that was it. Once I said the words, "I need help," I was liberated, because I was free from the chains of fear, shame.
Amazing.
I mean, that was the start for me.
You said at the start, like, "Oh, you wanted to do the hour version." It's like, I'm
took more than 2 minutes. I'm sorry.
Like, I'm bad at sort of jumping in and timekeeping and stuff like that, but I can't not jump in on your story. I can only listen to it because it is a story of hope, and I think a lot of people, who live hopelessly and can also identify with your symptoms, with those things, and probably don't know the label or the situation or what it is that's going on, or the fact that there's help available and things like that. And I think, as we sort of bonded over when we first met, men unfortunately have, a journey to go on to start sort of changing some of that stuff. What did you?
We're still in the evolution, mate.
I think you're right. I think you're right. There seems to, like, for me, there seems to be kind of 4 conventional explanations for the sort of some of the gender differences between the way that we cope with mental health, and kind of socialization. So the way that men socialize and the way that men kind of deal with their health in general is still a huge problem. Our inability to seek help, I think, has been and will continue to be a huge problem until more people like you are kind of making it normalized to, go, like you just said, I need help. And Johnny last week was amazing at sort of talking about that as well. Our coping mechanisms, as you've touched on, booze and some of the bad vices in life, are pretty bad in this situation. And then there's this kind of, and this is also the other one that I pick up on quite a lot, and it's a weird word that nowadays. It's like gender stratification. So this idea of hierarchy and this kind of slightly like weird social construct of what men should be. And Terry last week was very good at articulating some of that stuff. And I think we do have a long way to go to get rid of some of that stuff.
I mean, you've described, all of the flaws of masculinity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I grew up in a sports environment as well. So you add that together. It was, I was very much taught at an early age, you don't demonstrate vulnerability. You do not demonstrate. You walked onto a sports field, you couldn't let your opponent know you were vulnerable. I couldn't let my coach know I was vulnerable because there were plenty of people who wanted my place in the team. So from a very, very young age, you are, programmed that I will not show vulnerability. I will fight through this. Not a soul knows about this. And you invent your own coping mechanisms, and inevitably, they're not always healthy. And you're absolutely right. And if I pick up on one of the things you spoke about there, Pete, is vulnerability, and I think that's so important in this chapter that we're living through right now. For me, as an HR leader, one of the things that we're really trying to empower in our people is actually, number one, it's okay not to be okay, but it's also okay to be okay. And I think the key thing is to encourage people to not be afraid of their feelings, not be guilty for their feelings. Because right now, actually, during lockdown, it was easy to feel guilty for doing well as it was for not doing well. And I think, that whole sense, how do we empower vulnerability? And that comes by, as leaders, and, you'll know this as a CEO, me as a people director, unless we role model it, we've got no chance. It's so important we do that.
I totally agree, and it was fascinating talking to Rob Stevenson a couple of weeks ago, who's done the kind of leadership board for mental health, the Inside Out leaderboard. So it's changing. Hey, because we could have this conversation around masculinity for hours. No one's tuning in just to listen to that. I'm sure it's fascinating. It is. And just give me, so obviously, I have a vested interest in health as the CEO of Vala, and also kind of giving people some wisdom on how to live healthier, happier lives. To explain to me how you suddenly decided exercise was your crutch, your new vice.
So actually, there was a gap. The recovery moment and the diagnosis was 2006, and over a long, over those first few years, my focus was purely on my mental wellness, on recovering, on just rebuilding my life from the debris and wreckage. I mean, one way I always describe it is, when I woke up that next morning, I was a baby boy in a man's body. Because if you think about, I'd lived this life of chaos and illness for 15 years. I didn't actually know how to function in a normal way. We use that word normal reluctantly, but I didn't know how to function without illness. I only knew how to get by in the chaos of it. So I those first few years were just really about learning how to live mentally, feeling confident enough to take baby steps to exist in this world. And I neglected my physical well-being during this point, and we got to a point by
that's an understatement. And
yeah,
again,
I know it is.
I have to say things like that to you, but it is. I mean, honestly, and it makes the story even more remarkable, and it also shows that the physical impact of mental illness, and I think that's often overlooked. Is like the physical impact of it is catastrophic.
And I'll tell you the story. Well, I got to the point where by early 2012, I picked up this flu virus that I just couldn't get rid of. And don't worry, it didn't have COVID symptoms. It was actually the flu. And I went to the doctor, and she'd helped me a hell of a lot when I was recovering. In my first phases of rebuilding after the mental illness, and she was kind of like, "Ro, I need you to sit I step on the scales," and I'm kind of like, "Go on then, yeah." And she said, "You're over 19 stone. I'm not going to tell you what your BMI is because they probably don't have a number for it on the chart." She said, "There is no wonder that you are, that you're not well, because you can't treat your body like this." And actually, it's the only time during that period that I could sense my mental well-being was beginning to buckle as well. The two are interlinked.
They are. I agree.
And look, I got lucky. This was around the time that 24-hour gyms were coming in. And I tried gyms before, and I'd go in, and quite literally, I'm on this. Look, when we talk about mental well-being, it's the whole image conscious thing as well. And I would go on the treadmill and what have you, and you've got 19 stone of row bumping up and down. I don't know how that treadmill will cope. And quite literally, you're looking around you, and all you can see out of your eyes, and it's not true, but all you can see are nubile, young, fit, attractive people who are making everything look easy. The fact that the person on the treadmill next to me probably looked like the old Tango Man and was probably struggling as much as myself, I didn't see that. I saw Limp Christie, and I'm kind of like, oh boy, it's kind of like, I can't do this. So I think I joined the gym 3 times and quit every time. And then the last one was, as I said, 24-hour gym opened up, which was the first of those. 24-hour gym, and it was about 5 minutes walk from my old workplace. So I decided, yeah, you know what, we'll try this. It's last chance saloon. And what I did, I started going there about 4 or 5 in the morning, because I knew that no one else would be there to watch me die on this. And believe me, I fully expected to die on the treadmill. And it just started from there. I realized actually that I did realize I was in Last Chance Saloon. And I realized that I'd been in Last Chance Saloon before with my mental well-being. And that was what pulled me through. There's absolutely no doubting the resilience that I picked up in recovery from mental illness has driven the resilience that's allowed me to thrive in the rest of my life. And this was a perfect example, because it was actually, I've come from the edge before, and I'm gonna do it again. And what I did, mind had been a huge factor in my life. It was them who were able to arrange for me to see. I went to a support group, and in the end, they got me to a doctor who got me that diagnosis of bipolar. And that was liberating. It's very rare you get.
Sorry to interrupt you. And again, like, we'll go back to the exercise thing in a minute. But how important was that to have a label?
Oh, mate, it was huge. Very rare that you get a diagnosis of one of the most fatal illnesses around. You jump for joy. But the reality was, in that split second, I went from self-loathing to self-loving. Because I now had not this person that I couldn't stand, but I had an illness which I was going to beat.
Yeah.
And Mind had led me to understanding what it meant. They educated me, they educated my friends and family, and we understood what the journey was ahead. And going forward again 6-7 years, it was my love for what Mind had done in my life, which I turned around then and said, you know what, I'm going to run 10 kilometers and fundraise for Mind. And believe me, in those days, for me, 10K was a long, long way. And I remember ringing my mum and I said, I'm running 10 kilometers for Mind. She says, oh boy, you're going to die. And I'm kind of like, thanks for that. So I knew that as soon as someone put just one penny in that sponsor fund, there was no backing out. So, and as soon as someone did, there was no backing out. So I did that 10K, which was in May 2013. And I was still at that point 16 stone. And then I got the bug, so I kept on going. And being a little bit, still having the odd moment where I can be slightly exuberant. We won't use the word manic, but I can be exuberant. I said, you know what? We won't just run one half marathon to raise money. Let's try running 3 half marathons in 5 weeks to raise money. I kind of like said, Mum, I'm running 3 half marathons in 5 weeks. And she's just kind of like, you'll die. I'll kind of like, yeah, absolutely. Don't worry. So we did that. And of course, the next conversation with Mind was, how do I get on your London Marathon team? And I'm not going to tell you what my mum's response was, because you can figure she's given up saying that now. She's very proud of me. But it was that whole piece that I committed that I was gonna help people. Yeah. For me, I realized that actually I did have a powerful story. I had a powerful voice, and this was at a time. And Johnny and I have spoken about this. We both live in Clapham, and I bump into him regularly. And we spoke about this one time when we saw each other. Actually, when we were speaking out, and I love the fact now that so many voices want to be heard, because quite frankly, I'm bored of my own voice, so I should think the rest of the world are as well. But
you're never going to get bored of your voice.
Joking aside, it's a fact that at that time, there was still a stigma. There was still a dearth of people who were willing to stand up and share that story. I never self-label myself as brave or inspiring, because all I ever wanted to do was change lives. All I ever wanted to do was be able to say, actually, if one person turned around that heard my story, that experienced my life, spent time with me, and realized that actually I do have something that I want to live for, or I go away and help the person who I'm living with, who's living through insufferable pain, that was enough for me.
Yeah.
And that's what shapes my life. It's knowing that, it's what we always talk about with running. You have to have a deeper reason. It's not for me, unless you're an Olympian. It's not about times. And look, I got to a point where I was pretty quick. I've run a couple of sub 3 hour marathons, which is a benchmark for any amateur athlete to be considered as pretty good. So it's like, I'm proud of that, but it's still always been about something much deeper than that. And it's, what gets me up at 6 in the morning, or actually, I say 6 in the morning because my wife's in the next room watching this, and she'll start complaining if I go back into the habit of getting up at 5:30. What gets me up is that it's knowing actually this is a vehicle by which you can change lives.
Yeah.
What allows me to speak openly in the workplace about my mental well-being is knowing that I can change lives. What's allowed me to spend time with you, to talk at conferences like Man-Made. It's knowing that we can change perceptions, change lives, challenge what people believe.
I also think, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm going to ask you another question, actually.
Yeah.
But it's an observation. I think a lot of people that I speak to who found that thing that gets them through, there's probably a little voice in the back of the head somewhere that goes, if I don't do this, if I stop, like, you know, do I go back to where I was? And so it's definitely, I'm so proud of you for finding that thing that, you know, has given you so much back. And I think everybody needs to find that thing. And I also think it's really important for anybody that's listening to this not to go, oh, I have to go and do a marathon. I think your 10K, like your 1K was the milestone, like literally, and then boom, 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 boom. So
I've written about this often, mate. And you know what? One person's 1 mile is another's marathon.
Exactly.
Marathon. One person's 7-hour marathon is another person's 2-hour marathon. Right. What I love about the running community is everybody is equal. We all have a shared goal, which is the finish line, but actually we all have our individual race. We are running our race to achieve something that's very special to us. And that's what I love about it, because it's so personal. It really is. So you are right. But actually, you know, one of the things that I would say to all of our listeners is, yes, it's important to find that thing that gets you through. But let's talk about the but, because I'm not too proud to talk about the but. Last year, I've had my most challenging time with my mental well-being in a very, very long time. I found myself in a position where I was working extremely long hours. That was my choice to do so. This was back in my previous role in the second half of last year, and I was burning out. We'll get to that phrase, burnout, but I was working silly hours. I was trying to run to and from work, because to run to work helped me get ready for the challenging day ahead. To run home from work helped me to shut the day of work behind me, and be a husband when I got home, and work where it should be. But the problem with that was, actually, I'd stopped running for the right reasons. I was just running to build up mileage and as a crutch.
Oh, I see. I get you. Yeah.
And what running had always been for me was that time of solitude, that time of reflection, that time of aloneness, to just take everything in as an introvert in this busy world, to manage my mental well-being. And actually, what I was doing from it was constantly rushed instead of unhurried. So it was doing me harm mentally. I was burning out. Because I was burning out mentally, physically I was breaking as well. So my whole body, mentally, and my mentality, through this combination of working ridiculously long hours and trying to fit in vacuous training, as I called it, it was purposeless.
Yeah.
It took me to burnout and back to a very dark place for the first time in a long, long time. And I'm very grateful that my wife really was able to ask questions, understand what I was going through. I was able to fall back on the techniques that I'd used to manage myself apart from running. And actually, I got injured, which was the best thing that ever happened, because I ended up with 2 months without running, and I had to understand what were the other coping mechanisms I had. I also started my new job. We went into lockdown, and suddenly I have gone back to, yes, running lots, but running with a purpose.
Yeah.
Working lots, but working with boundaries. And my whole life now has the balance and status quo back, which I was in danger of totally blowing away at the end of last year.
Well, it's so good to hear that you found that opportunity to slow down, I guess, which is maybe, you know, what a lot of other people have found. COVID's given a lot of people opportunity to slow down. Just to move us on slightly, So one of the reasons I'm talking to such interesting people in my life for this series is, I think what's happened in such a short space of time over the last sort of 12 weeks or so is really quite remarkable. Like, unprecedented is a word that's been battered around quite a lot, but it's been a huge shift. I mean, not even the scientists really predicted, I think, what would happen to society in such a compressed space of time globally. But on a personal and I guess a professional level, how do you think all of this has been handled? Like, and obviously we're kind of talking about mental health and health and well-being and stuff like that. But, how has all this been handled for society? Do you think it's been handled well? Do you think, we've made a complete hash of it? Like, what do you think?
I think that, at the top level of how it's been handled by the people in power, okay? I think it's fair to say they've got a lot wrong. However, I think it's also fair to say that it's as close to a no-win situation as you will find. I think that it's easy for us from the comfort of our living rooms to sit down and criticize. What I have got objection with is the ambiguity that we've been surrounded with so often. And ambiguity is never good for mental well-being. And I think, the ambiguity has really, really driven, a lot of challenges in terms of mental well-being for people, the uncertainty, and of course, the fact that the economy inevitably is going into meltdown.
Yeah. That scares me more, almost in some ways, than the and sorry to interrupt you, but that scares me almost as much as the dreaded virus, because we know the implications of debt and stress and this is not going to end well. But you're right, it is a zero-sum game. Like, no, there's never going to be a winner in this, but the government have done what they have to do. But
agreed.
Yeah, it's tricky.
I absolutely agree. But look, I've always been one to challenge and play devil's advocate as well. And I remember going on to LinkedIn, the second or third week of lockdown, and every other post was around mental well-being this, mental well-being that, mental illness. And I'm kind of like, okay, I'm kind of like, there's two things here. It's like anything else. Yes, you want people to speak openly, but actually it's quite dangerous when people start playing expert. I think, it's kind of like, okay, demonstrate to me your credibility here. I'm interested in what you have to say. But then, of course, there's so much noise which confuses people even more. So I think what we've ended up with is such a lack of cohesion that it's been staggering, and not staggering in a good way. If I take Mental Health Awareness Week, the theme was changed to kindness, specifically around what's been going on with COVID, which I thought was a great thing. But actually, if you went on to social media and did searches around Mental Health Awareness Week, probably about 2% of the posts were around kindness. Everyone was just talking about their own agenda.
Yeah.
Everyone was trying to talk about their own feelings, whereas I'm kind of like, stop. You're actually just creating a vacuum in which all of this is going down because people don't know what to absorb.
Yeah, well, the irony of kindness being a social media campaign, probably one of the unkindest places ever created, is not lost on me. And actually, the other thing that strikes me, and I want your opinion on this as well, because you're a man of the world. Like, language carries so much weight, and as we're discovering in the last few weeks as well, we're not going to go too deep into politics. We should probably avoid it. It's another hour on its own, but language carries so much weight, and it also creates what's the damage, like, in terms of the language around COVID and lockdown and social distancing, isolation, all these words that kind of came out at the beginning of this pandemic, like from a mental health perspective, they feel so damaging as well. And I feel like, and I'll get your opinion on this as well. The language of all of this has been so detrimental.
Look, semantics are always important, mate. Although again, there will be some that justifiably will argue, well, actually, what other language can you use in certain of those cases? I think self-isolation is exactly that, self-isolation. I think you could say, stay at home was a good way to put it, rather than semantically, it sounds better and it sounds less threatening. And you are absolutely right. How we phrase things is so important, and I've been fascinated by the semantics of our newsreaders. How do you get that message across? And actually, how do you get across a message of death, which is exactly death to 40,000 people, death to the economy, death to our lives as we know it? How do you put that across in a way which is reflecting the gravity of the situation, but actually doesn't patronize us? And I think, actually there's that balance to be found of finding kindness in words, finding constructive words, but actually making sure you don't go over the other edge of actually patronizing people with your words as well.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I mean, it's probably about the time that we first met that I was writing my book, and I was working with this incredible editor who taught me a huge amount about language. Because I'd put down what I wanted to say, and then he'd sit with me and go like, there's probably a blunter way of saying that, or a softer way of saying that, or this idea of, and it was just, I learned so much about words and language and its impact and effect. And I think maybe that's why I've been so sensitive to it during the last 12 weeks, because especially when we have certain people around the world who don't understand the impact of words on mental well-being and people's health, it's just astonishing, absolutely astonishing.
It's one of the things that I was very, very fortunate I did finally go to university and graduate, which is what I should tell everyone. So I've never actually used it in my job because I work in HR, but I did graduate in media and marketing. So of course, use of words, use of messaging is so important. And, working in HR and in recruitment, your employer brand messaging is so at the forefront of what you do. And actually, you're absolutely right. Through this COVID, through this COVID pandemic, I think the messaging has at best been ordinary. Not necessarily because of what we've spoken about in terms of the bluntness of the wording, but as I've probably going back to the ambiguity around it.
That's it.
If you send out messaging that people can't understand, you can't expect people to actually, or if you send out messaging which tells people, and in terms of mental well-being, you sat there, can I do this? I can do this. No, I can't do it. Oh, I can do it. Oh, but maybe I can do it. Oh, I'm not, I could end up not quite in a manic, but it certainly end up with your head spinning.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, one of the in the early weeks, one of the big topics that came through our doctors, GPs and physician associates, kind of, in droves. The thing that just kept coming up was anxiety, and it was almost people's anxiety of like I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this cough is COVID. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. I don't know if I'm supposed to do that. Can I go down to the pharmacy? Can I do this? Like, it was just pure anxiety and stress levels. I mean, terrifying, really.
Yeah, and I think the testing strategy again is probably one of the absolute disasters, and I don't need to tell you about that.
Let's not go there.
Within your,
let's not go there. Honestly, I've gone grey.
I don't have to worry about that.
It baffles me. I'm baffled by the whole thing. But look, I think the other thing about these kind of huge natural disaster, black swan events that, you know, in our lifetimes, bud, we're not going to live through many of them. I hope not anyway. But do we go back to a normal after this? And I know it's a bit of a contrived question because of all the rhetoric around it, but is there normal after this, or, you know, do you not do normal? I mean, what's your thinking?
I hope we certainly never go back to where we were. I think with anything like this, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on where we've been, reflect on what was going well in our lives, and reflect on the things that, because I'd be absolutely astounded if someone told me that they'd had the perfect life. And, you know, for me, I think it's so important that each and every one of us takes this time to reflect. Whatever our experience of COVID, whether it's been a largely positive one or a largely negative one, is actually think, what are the things that I've learned through this and that I want to take with me through to the rest of my life? Because remember, my normal and your normal are two different normals. You're not getting up at 5:30 tomorrow morning to go for a run. Actually, I mightn't either by the time I get to bed tonight. But the reality is, when we talk about normal, our normal is relative to us. And I hope that none of us go back to normal, because we all need to look, you know, I certainly will be looking and thinking, actually, I don't anymore have to get up at 5:30 so I can be in the office at 7. You know, I certainly, I definitely will value spending the extra quality time with my wife that I've been able to. Now, you know, we don't know what that looks like. What does working life look like? Will we all go back to working 5 days in an office? Will it be 3? That bit's out of our hands. But I think my message to anyone that's listening is, think about what you can influence. Think about what your normal will look like in the future. Think about, what are the things that actually I have control over in my life that I can take forward with me?
Yeah, amazing words as always from you. I think I'd like, before we go, thank you for saying that, because you know, you do word it so incredibly well, and I think everybody does spend a huge amount of time looking at other people and going like, how do we be more like that? And it's like, no, you got to kind of start there and move out. Awesome.
Yeah. It's always good to have role models, Pete. It's always good to have role models, but at the end of the day, it's about the person that you are and maximizing your potential.
Yeah, definitely. Look, before I go to some quick fire questions and a little bit of chat kind of about what's happening next with you, I'm actually really super interested to get your perspective on what you think people need to start doing more of to keep kind of fit and healthy, especially when we're a bit locked down. So do you have any good tips or routines, things that anybody listening can start to do to, you know, take those first steps? And you've talked about it a little bit already, but where did you find that from?
Yeah, and look, it does come from willpower, but find what works for you. Not everyone's going to be Mo Farah. You know, find what works for you. I'd say start with, you know, one of the things we do talk about in running is time on your feet. Now, the best ways to get time on your feet is going for a long walk. And there's nothing as good as being out with nature. So, you know, especially now that there's slightly less restriction on what you can do for exercise, you know, obviously I'm talking from a London perspective, but, you know, even in the biggest cities, there's green space. Find it, walk, enjoy being at peace with nature. That will inspire you to want to do more, I would think. But, you know, if exercise classes are your thing, you know, have a look at what online classes you can do. Again, my always thing is, be realistic in your goals. And just make sure that you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for anyone else. Do it for yourself. Do it for enjoyment first, and the achievement will follow second.
Amazing.
Because if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to do it anyway.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, a big turning point with me and my mental health was getting a dog. You know, 4 or 5 years ago, to have that, you know, reason to go out more, to walk around more, to do all those things. And, you know, that was great. This is a really amazing group of guys, predominantly guys. There are some ladies, but predominantly guys that I've been very fortunate to be part of for the last kind of 18 months or so. And we do these walks to the football games. Have you heard about this? So we're doing the walk and talk. So we walk to the away games, and sometimes there's 60 of us, sometimes there's kind of, you know, 10 of us or whatever it is. But just that sense of purpose that everybody is doing something for themselves when they all get together and they share that experience, like, it's so nice. And it's about those individual journeys, not the collective, you know, thing. And I do worry about those people who've been locked up not doing those walks, you know what I mean? It's such a small thing for them, but it's such a big thing at the same time. So just getting out. I'm gonna, I've got to get, we're running out of time. Would you believe it? I'm going to fire some quickies at you, and then I'm going to a couple of questions from people that have been watching, and then we're going to talk about the future. Favorite book?
Letters to Myself, which was the second inverted commas autobiography by Mandela.
Interesting.
Was basically a collection of all of letters that he wrote to other people, but also to himself during his time in incarceration and beyond. Just an unbelievable insight into perhaps the most resilient man in modern history.
That's an understatement, isn't it? I mean, again, it's remarkable to even think what somebody like that endured, and then still came out of it sort of optimistically. Oh, incidentally, and I'm going to go back. One of the questions we had is where you find your optimism. So you're one of the most optimistic people, like, I know, or at least on the surface. How do you find optimism? Is it something that you have to kind of, does it come naturally? Is it something you work at? Like, where do you get your optimism from?
Yeah, it's two. I'm going to give you two answers, very quick fire answers. Number one, from where I've been, every day's a gift. Okay. And actually, when we've overcome what I've overcome with the help of God and my friends, by overcoming that, actually none of even what we're facing now gets close. So I've been, every day I wake up, I know that I've overcome much worse. And actually, where does my optimism come from? It comes from it comes in my
family. Amazing. And even when I look back at, and I hadn't planned this series to be this group of people, like, it wasn't like a contrived thing. It was just me going, I want to speak to this person, this person, this person, this person, and they're the people that will say yes to me. But when I look at someone like Emma, who's lived with Parkinson's for the last kind of, 8 years of her life or whatever. I look at Johnny. I look at even Heather, who lost her leg in the horrific accident, overcame that. I look at Rob, and like every single person seems to have overcome something in their life, but also sees that thing not to define them, but to kind of, adversity reveals character. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's remarkable.
Mate, I so hear you. And actually, one of the things I've always been clear about is, and I've got every respect for, say, someone like Johnny, who's makes his life and his living and has achieved more than I could in a day, in a lifetime. He achieves in a day as a mental health campaigner, and that impact. But actually, the one thing I've always been very, very clear about, and I had the opportunity to work within the mental health space, but straight away I said no, because I don't want my life to be defined. To be defined by that area, which is why I'm very proud of the career that I've been able to build outside of that.
Favorite movie?
It depends on the day, but typically I'd always have to go back to Shawshank. And again,
it's a prison theme emerging.
It's a story of resilience.
It's a brilliant book as well. Favorite song?
Favorite song? I would say Sir Duke, Stevie Wonder.
Interesting.
You can feel it all over. Yeah, because if you say Sir Duke, people actually don't know which one I mean. That's the one.
Amazing. Favorite quote?
Anything by Stevie, to be honest.
Stevie's a legend. You know what I mean? Like, it's just amazing guy. And again, somebody sort of overcoming adversity or adversity.
Yeah.
Favorite quote?
It's actually a biblical verse.
Go on. I don't mind.
Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, which is run with perseverance the the race set before you. Amazing.
And finally, because we're almost out of time, the hours just shoot by. Time goes weird in lockdown anyway, but finding these conversations. And the other reason I'm doing this, and I've said this to everybody, is that, you know, we've all been doing lots of Zooms and socials and stuff like that. And somebody at work said, well, you've got such interesting friends. Why don't you just film them? So don't do your Zoom hangouts, just, you know, record them. What's next for you, Ray? What's happening in the next 12 months?
Look, I think that the one thing that we haven't got right now is certainty about the extracurriculars. So again, it's just dealing with what can I control is 12 months of really enjoying quality time with Claire, my wife.
Yeah.
12 months of working hard at work, of nourish even remotely at the moment before we can see people properly in person, nourishing friendships with people like yourself, with the people around me that I care about. For me, you know, that's the core pillars, and then everything else builds out around it. Of course, there'll probably be some crazy mileage in there as well.
I've no doubt whatsoever there's going to be just a casual marathon chucked in there.
Well, actually, I mean, if we come out of COVID, I was meant to be running 20 marathons in 2020 to raise money for Mind and 3 other great charities. I put that on hold, but my plan right now is to do 21 in 2021. So
21 marathons.
If we look ahead, I'll be. I'm hoping to do 21 marathons next year.
That can be healthy. Look, listen, my friend. Well, an absolute joy. I need to have the last few words. I would just like to say, on behalf of like everybody that has absorbed your energy over the last, you know, however many years, like, just a massive thank you. I think your wisdom, your knowledge, your love, your giving your story to as many people as possible has it's made an immeasurable difference on the world. And I say this to so few people. Like, I think the number of lives you've probably saved is an astonishing number, and it's the one that we can't measure, and that's really important. You know, you'll never really know how many lives you've saved because they're not coroner's stats, and therefore they're the most important numbers. And I think what you've done over the last, 10, 12 years of your life, just being who you are and sharing that story and stuff, mate, thank you so much, because it's a great thing that you do, and you inspire so many people. You inspire me to be a better human person. So a human person, a better person. So listen, thank you. Take care. Go and spend time with Claire, and have enjoy lockdown, what's left of it. It feels like we're coming to the end of it.
Thank you so much for having me. And look, if any of the audience do have questions that we haven't covered, feel free to send them through to you, and I'll happily respond. Yeah,
they'll find you on various social media platforms and stuff as well. But Roy, take care of yourself.
Thanks for having me. God bless you. You're a great man.
On the other side.
Pardon?
I'll see you on the other side.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Take care, buddy.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.